Na Legislature ng Guam is called to order. I'm going to ask if we can please rise for a prayer. And I'm going to ask Senator San Nicolas if you can lead us in prayer.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Heavenly Father, we are gathered here today to once again do the people's work. I asked through your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, to implore you, our Father, to please send down upon us the Holy Spirit, that we may have the wisdom we need to weigh the issues before us carefully, to factor in the lives of the people that are going to be affected and who are depending on us, and to be brave enough to make whatever actions and decisions we have to in order to accomplish what it is that you would want us to accomplish in this day and in your name. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
Thank you,
Amen.
Senator. Senator Ogden, can you please lead us in the recitation of the Inifresi?
Inifresi. Ginini mastakulu, gihina soku, imastakulum, ikorasonhu, zani masfigu, nanina sinahu, hu fresen maisazu, parabai hu protehi, zanu defendi, ihinengi, ikutura, ilinguahi, iairi, ihanum, zanitano tomorrow. Ni rechaku diretsu, gininasu stata, esti hu afirma gihilu i Biblia, zani banderahu, imbanderan guaha.
Thank you very much. Senator McCready, if you can lead us in the Guam hymn in Chamorro, and Senator Duenas in the national anthem. Thank you very much. Can the clerks please take roll call?
Senator Tom Atta. Present. Senator Tony Atta. Senator Uggan. Vice-Speaker Cruz. Senator Duenas. Senator Limtiaco. Senator McCready. Senator Morrison. Senator Munya Barnes. Senator Respicio. Senator Rodriguez. Senator Snickles. Speaker Wampat.
Yeah.
Senator Yamashita. Madam Speaker, there is a quorum.
Thank you very much. Senator Respicio, you recognize for a motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Good morning, and good morning, colleagues. On item 7 of the agenda, I move that we approve the legislative journal dated September 30th, October 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 3rd, subject to correction.
Can we excuse Senator? Senator, can we excuse Senator?
And also,
Porcello?
I move that we excuse those senators not present for this session.
Thank you. And on that motion?
Okay.
Sorry?
Now on the
call for
motion,
the approval
Madam
of the
Speaker.
legislative journal. So,
The motion first, yeah.
Senator, can we do an adoption of the agenda first?
Yeah, I move that we adopt this session agenda dated today, October 16, 2014, as our agenda for session.
On that motion, without any objection, so ordered.
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker. And now I move that we approve the legislative journal dated September 30, October 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 2014, subject to correction.
On that motion, no objection, so ordered.
Madam Speaker, there are communications and petitions that I move that they be pen a day session journal.
Objection, so ordered.
There are messages from Imagala and Guahan, and I also move that these messages be pen a day session journal.
So ordered.
And there are reports of standing committees, and I also move for the same.
So ordered.
Thank you. There are no reports of select committees. So under introduction and first reading of bills and resolutions, I move that bill number 404-32LS, bill number 405-32 COR through bill numbers 412-32LS, resolution number 463-32LS through resolution numbers 472-32LS, resolution number 473-32 COR through resolution numbers 482-32 COR, as well as certificate number 194-32 COR through certificate numbers 195-32 COR, all be given its first reading.
No objections, so ordered. On motions,
Yeah. Let me, Madam Speaker, there was a letter I understand submitted by Senator Lim Tiaco relative to bill number 411-32. His bill is an act to deappropriate $75,000 from the sums appropriated to the legislature and reappropriate $75,000 to the Guam Memorial Hospital, and I understand that you're ready to respond to his request that you waive a public hearing requirement on this bill.
yes, I did, and so on that motion, then there are no objections, so ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Having done that, this bill then qualifies for placement on the session agenda, and I move the bill 411-32, again by Senator Lim Tiaco, and I just read the title. I move that that be placed in the second reading file.
Hearing no objections, so ordered.
Madam Speaker, you also called us into session primarily in response to Vice-Speaker Cruz's request for us to entertain and deliberate on the matter of Bill 394-32 introduced by BJF Cruz. And I'll read the title: An Act to add a new Article 5 to Title 4, Chapter 8 of the Guam Code Annotated to create a new hybrid retirement system with mandatory participation by Government of Guam employees hired after December 31st, 2014, with optional participation for defined, I don't think this is the original title, right? Let me just get the original title.
So you were able to?
Yeah, I'm just going to read the original title because the version that I want to move on the floor is the version that was reported out of committee. So this version, 394-32, as introduced by BJF Cruz, it's an act to add a new Article 5 to Title 4, Chapter 8 of the Guam Code Annotated, to create a new hybrid retirement system with mandatory participation by Government of Guam employees hired after December 31st, 2014, with optional participation for defined contribution retirement system participants who elect to transfer to the new hybrid plan in accordance with regulations to be promulgated. So I move that this version, as reported out by his committee, be placed in the second reading file.
Hearing no objections, so ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have no further motions. We have no legislative concurrences to act on, so I guess we can proceed to the second reading file. Thank you.
So we are on the second reading file, and we have Bill number 411, and Mr. Senator Lim Tiaco, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Bill 411 is a very straightforward and simple bill. And basically, through the austerity measures at our office, we've been able to save a certain amount of money that we would like to appropriate to one sector of our government that is in dire need of it. Not to say that there are a lot of other worthy causes as well, but I look back at the 32nd Guam Legislature and I look at what our colleagues have been able to accomplish with the support of GMH, and there were several times during the course of this legislature that we've been there to support GMH, and this bill just takes it one step closer. And it's not a whole lot of money, but it's what little my office can contribute from our operational budget to purchase 1 cryostat, 2 BiPAP systems, and 10 infusion pumps. And Madam Speaker, this equipment that will be purchased for the hospital will go a long way for public health and safety, and ensure that those that are treated at GMH have the necessary resources and equipment they need in order to do so. And I would, just looking back at how all of our colleagues have supported bills to help support GMH, I look forward to the unanimous passage of this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator. On the motion, Senator Duenas, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker, thank you for first of all, for the courtesy that you've extended to our good colleague. I think that it speaks volumes of this body, and especially moving into the discussions we're going to have on the subsequent bill. But I thank you for your courtesy, and I applaud it. I certainly rise in full support of Bill 411, Madam Speaker. I'm sure there'll be plenty of time for our good colleague to speak on his not running for office this term, but I want to take this time now to at least make a few comments and recognize his efforts while in this body. I have found no one in my experience that I've seen with the tenacity of Senator Lim Tiaco when it comes to sticking to his word and standing by his convictions and beliefs. And leading by example is something that has been a hallmark of his not only campaigning for office, but obviously one thing that he has executed while in office. And I think he's to be commended and respected highly and regarded for living by those principles, despite other issues that would influence his vote on matters, particularly when it comes to fiscal matters. So I'll just close in saying that this is a very worthy cause, and certainly in keeping with Senator Lim Tiaco's commitment to a very frugal and straightforward budget process, and to take these resources and with all the attention that has been paid to the plight of the Guam Memorial Hospital and other subsequent bills that we've dealt with, Madam Speaker, here, I think it's a very laudable and a commendatory cause that he has taken upon, and I certainly will vote in the affirmative on this legislation. So thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to speak on Bill 41132.
You're welcome, Senator. On the motion, is there anybody else who would like to speak? There being none, Senator Lim Tiaku, would you like to close?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker. I do apologize, but I'm not sure if I made the motion to appropriately, but I just want to thank the retiring speaker for his kind words. I'd also like to amend the bill to include all of my colleagues as sponsors on this bill, first sorted alphabetically, and then by age, and then by seniority. However you choose to do it, Madam Speaker, but I'd like to amend it to add all my colleagues onto the bill, and I'd like to motion it be sent down to the third reading file.
I think what would be best is in alphabetical order.
And it be sent down to the third reading
without
file.
any objections, and so ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
And on the motion then to send 411 to the third reading file without any objections, so ordered. On Bill 394, Mr. Vice Speaker, you recognize.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for calling us into session in such short notice and after my request to you yesterday. And I thank the Chairman of the Committee of Rules for moving Bill 394 onto the session agenda. Madam Speaker, I'd like to ask that the body accept a substituted version by myself on the floor of Bill 394. And the only difference in this substituted version from the version that was originally introduced at the request of the retirement fund is that we added a section 5. In the event that the Government of Guam is permitted by the federal government to enter into voluntary agreements with the Social Security Administration to extend Social Security coverage to Government of Guam employees, the fund shall, within 90 days of such permission, submit a plan to Legislature and Imagalahin Guahan to incorporate Social Security as a component of retirement for employees who are not members of the defined benefit plan within 1 year. Once submitted, the plan shall be subject to the approval of the Legislature. And so I'd just like to ask that this body accept the substitution that I'm asking to make on the floor at this time.
On the motion to accept, which is a substituted by the author on the floor, no objection, so ordered. Okay.
Having done that, Madam Speaker, I'd like a very short opportunity to speak.
You may proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. As was evidenced in a comment in one of the newspapers yesterday, it is not a secret that I am not a member of the retirement fund. But I do take offense to the thought that I do not care for the retirement fund, nor do I hold it in best interest. Madam Speaker, I have many colleagues that I served with on the Northern Mariana bench who I know are suffering considerably at this time because of what happened to the retirement fund of the Northern Marianas. I have spent many hours discussing with the actuary and the financial advisor and the receiver of the Northern Mariana system the problems that occurred and what happened up there that caused the demise of the Northern Mariana retirement system. So I'm very conscious and very concerned and committed to make sure that that same thing does not happen here on Guam. I just wanted that very clear up front, Madam Speaker, that though I am not a member of the retirement fund and will never be, I'm precluded by law from becoming a member of the retirement fund. I hold the retirement fund very close and dear to me to make sure that the 15,000 and even more of government employees that have gone through and served this government for the last 60, 70 years are taken care of in their retirement, as I am now. About 5 years ago, Madam Speaker, many of us who were in the legislature at that time were invited to a summit at the Sheraton Hotel. I remember that day very clearly. It was overcast outside, as I recall, and we were all shuffled into a small room on the main floor in the back corner. And the actuary from the retirement fund and the members of the retirement fund proceeded to explain what was happening to the retirement fund, and more importantly, more specifically, to the defined contribution members of the retirement fund. As many of you know, or some of you know, in 1995, the Guam Legislature, at the behest of the actuaries and the financiers, the financial advisors of the retirement fund, changed the retirement for GovGuam employees because it was realized at that time that the benefits were too expensive to continue to carry. It was driving up the cost of the unfunded liability. And so consequently, it was the determination of the legislature in 1995 to implement a defined contribution plan. That was not an OOG. That was actually a movement that was going throughout the entire country. It was the rage. And so the legislature passed the DC plan, and after October the 1st of 1995, all the new young members that were coming into the government of Guam became members of the defined contribution plan. Also at that time, there was a provision in the law that allowed for defined benefit members who wished to transfer out of the defined benefit plan to go into the defined contribution plan, that they could do so. In 1995, Madam Speaker, the economy of the United States was robust. It was the dot-com era of high earnings of investments. And many employees thought they could make a killing by switching from DB into DC. So consequently, a number of employees moved. There was a market drop in 2000, another huge drop in 2008 and 2009. And as a consequence, many people lost literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions, some people. But many of the DC members in the government of Guam lost tens of thousands. I was looking on Facebook a couple of weeks ago and I saw a posting by a fireman who admitted on his Facebook account that in the drop of 2008, he lost $87,000 in his portfolio. And he was lamenting what was going to happen to him. How was he going to be able to retire when the time came? Well, Madam Speaker, going back to that dreary day in 2009 when we met at the Sheraton, the retirement fund advisors told all of us that they were concerned about the DC employees and the fact that many of them had lost so much money that they didn't think that they would be able to survive, the employees would not be able to survive many years into their retirement. We were informed that some of the employees probably wouldn't last more than a couple of years with the amount of money that they had in their DC plan. I walked out of that, Madam Speaker, feeling in my gut the same helplessness and hopelessness that I felt when I accompanied my mother and she was diagnosed and was told that she had terminal cancer. I just didn't know what to do. I was paralyzed. Thankfully, not everybody is as weak as I am. We had a very, very intelligent and strong member of this body who unfortunately is no longer with us, Senator Ben Pangilinan. He immediately realized that the legislature had to spring into action and do something. Starting that year, he exchanged with the retirement fund and their advisors and actuaries over 16 versions of a new retirement plan to address the concerns that were presented to us and to make sure that in the coming years we didn't have a new class of people that retired poor. "16 versions. There were things he wanted that they couldn't, he was told by the actuaries and the financial advisors were too expensive. There were things that he didn't like that they were doing, and so it went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Finally, Madam Speaker, on June the 6th of this year, the retirement fund sent Senator Ben its last version of the bill. In it, it said, this is our final draft. This is what we think we can afford. This is what we think we can defend. And I want everybody to understand that the retirement board is in a real interesting and precarious position. When this legislature passed the early retirement provision, incentive plan, a number of DB employees sued the plan because that early retirement program doubled the unfunded liability of the plan. And the DB members were concerned that if the legislature continued to do things and implement laws that would increase the unfunded liability, that the sustainability of the plan in the future would be undermined. The court considered the case, and in the end, the court ordered that the retirement fund trustees had a fiduciary duty to all the DB members in the plan, and that they had a fiduciary responsibility in the event that this legislature or this or a governor attempted to pass any legislation or do anything that could undermine the sustainability or increase the unfunded liability of the fund, that they had a fiduciary duty to join those two named plaintiffs in the original case in suing to enjoin the implementation of the law. In the 16 iteration and exchanges between Senator Ben and the retirement fund, the retirement fund always made it clear to Senator Ben what they wanted to do was to make sure that they had a plan that they could defend in court as having been something that they had fully vetted, that they had done everything, done their due diligence to make sure that it was not going to undermine the sustainability of the fund. The retirement fund admits that in this proposal that they submitted, that it would increase the unfunded liability by $100 million. They testified to that. They're pretty open about it. But they believe, and their financial advisors also feel, that if they had to go to court to defend their actions in this case, that they would be able to defend this version the version that they sent us, and nothing else. I know that Senator Ben, in June, before he got really ill, was considering asking for an extension of the re-amortization of the plan by another year. And he was told, in no uncertain terms by the trustees, there shall not be and there cannot be an extension of the amortization period. They had made a commitment to us and to all the DB members that they would retire the unfunded liability by 2031, and the trustees of the fund were intent on following through on that plan of action. They were able to show that this $100 million increase would still be able to be satisfied and met, and they would still be able to pay down the unfunded liability by 2031. Their financial advisors also told them that the security ratio would not be increased. And so the retirement fund trustees are convinced that if they were taken to court, they would be able to justify and be able to show to the court that they had done everything in their power that they could to propose a plan that was not going to undermine the sustainability of the retirement fund. And so that was what they proposed to us. It was sent to him on June the 6th. It's ironic that a man who had spent the last 5 years of his life going through 16 versions of this bill would pass before he was able to even get one retirement fund check. But that did not deter him from doing those 5 years of exchanges of legislation to try to find the best plan possible. I assumed the chairmanship as an acting chairman of his committee and discovered the letter that he had received from the retirement fund. At his funeral, a couple of members of the retirement fund and their executive director actually approached me in church at the funeral asking me when we could meet to discuss this. The retirement fund was very interested in moving this forward because they're concerned about this. I didn't realize that that they had been working on this longer than 2009 until we had the hearing. And at that time, Madam Speaker, I was really impressed by the two members of the Board of Trustees, who are not even GovGuam employees. As some of you may or may not know, there are two public sector nominees to the board, Jerry Cruz and Lena Sanchez Leon Guerrero. And when the two of them presented, Lena's presentation was actually supposed to have been presented by the financial advisor. And she, without PowerPoint presentation, without the notes, was able to do what I thought was an even better presentation than what was on the PowerPoint presentation that we got later, explaining why it was imperative that we as a legislature pass this at the earliest possible date. And when Jerry spoke, I did not realize that he had been initially appointed to the retirement fund in 2004, maybe actually even before that, but he testified to the fact that since 2004, he and members of the fund have been looking at this and trying to figure out a way to address this issue. They knew after the market drop in 2000 that many of the employees were hurting and they needed to do something. And so it was not, as one person who had testified at the hearing, it was not a knee-jerk piece of legislation. They've been working on this for 10 years. A member of our body had been working on this for 5. They've been having their discussions, and they're doing their due diligence for 10 years to try to come up with this bill. It's not perfect. If one was to take into account what many of us want or would like to see. But I think it's important, and I'll admit it straight up. I have relatives who had been in the DB plan before and switched over to become DC members. I also have family members that left government service and then now have come back and are now in the DC plan because they withdrew. If I could, I'd love to be able to provide for them by letting them be able to go back to to the DB. I'm sure many of us have friends and family who we would love to be able to cover by letting them move back into the DB. It cannot happen. It cannot be supported. It would be too expensive to be able to do that. I'm going to instruct my staff to provide copies of a letter I just received this morning from the Chamber of Commerce and a letter that Chairman Uggan and I both received yesterday from the Judiciary about some of their concerns. And in this plan, Madam Speaker, there's concern about the fact that there wouldn't be retirement until 65. But as I tried to explain to someone the other day, if you were on Social Security, you wouldn't be able to avail yourself of the Social Security benefits until you were at least 63, and then with a penalty. And you'd have to be 67 before you could get it without the penalty. Another one of their concerns was, is it reasonable to ask someone to work for 42 years and end up with 73% of their 3 highest years? Why aren't we back at the 85% that we have currently in government? And I just had to bite my tongue and say, the reason why the DB plan was ended in 95 and the new DC plan was implemented was because the plan and the government could not afford nor could it sustain an 85% payback of your 85% of your highest years. Those are days gone by. It cannot come back. Unless, of course, we're willing to have half the budget into just the retirement fund. But we all have other projects that we want to do, but we've also got to be able to take care of the fact that there are 7,800 employees currently in the government service who, if and when they are to retire, a good percentage of them would not be able to survive after a couple of years. I did not realize how pervasive this problem was until every night I go to whenever I have a chance to go to the gym, there isn't a night that I don't get accosted by some employee, whether from DOE or from GPD or GFD, asking when we're going to do something about amending the retirement fund. I know firemen that have come up to me and said they've had 17 years of service and they've got $87,000 or $88,000 in their DC. And I just kind of look at them and I'm like, that's less than you make in a year. And he goes, yes, sir. He wouldn't be able to survive at the lifestyle that he's been in. So what Senator Ben and the retirement fund trustees, their legal counsel, their actuary, and their financial advisors have been working on in the last 5 years is what's contained in this. It's called a hybrid plan, and I know some will say it's a misnomer, that it's a DB plan with a small little fake little DC. Whatever you call it, or whatever we want to call it, Madam Speaker, the important thing is that what we will be doing with this plan is making sure that when 7,800 employees retire, whenever they retire at age 65, that they will be able to have a minimum amount of money on a monthly basis through all of their retirement years. After their 65th year, they can be assured that they will be getting a monthly check until the day they die. And their survivor will get a monthly check of 50% of what they were getting until they die. Currently, the DC members get one amount. I had a woman in my office the other day who retired a few years ago, and she withdrew her entire amount that she had. I said, what did you do with it? She goes, I paid down my mortgage so I don't have to pay the house. I paid off my debts, but she doesn't have a monthly income. So that's the plan, and there's also going to be a 1% that you're allowed to, or that you're going to be that the DC the new hybrid plan members will be contributing to continue their 457 plan. Currently, Madam Speaker, the DC employees, their contribution goes in, and depending on how astute you are in investments, you can either take an active role in investing your contributions, or you can leave it to someone up at the retirement fund to invest it for you in a type of plan that you would choose, either safe, moderate, or risky. And or if you know how to invest, you can actually take an active role in moving things around almost on a weekly or monthly basis, your investments, to make sure that you capitalize on the market as it's going up, or trying to shield yourself as it's going down. But the testimony that we received was that of the 7,800 employees, that yes, there are a number of employees who are doing not fairly well, but are doing well enough that they might be able to survive in their retirement, not the way that they think that they should. Because as was pointed out to me in the gym the other day by one of the employees, was in order for him to be able to receive $100,000 a year in retirement, as he now currently gets because of all the overtime that he gets, In order for him to be able to receive $100,000 in retirement, he would need $3 million in his 401k currently. I'm not sure who's close to that. But you can just take it down from there. To expect that you're going to be able to get 80, you probably need about 2.5, and 60 maybe 2. But in this one, the cost is shared by the entire pool. All of us that are, all of you that are DB, all the others that are DC, and everybody else. In one of the original iterations of this bill, it was going to be mandatory that all DC employees transfer their entire 401k earnings into the corpus for this new hybrid plan. Senator Ben was concerned about that. He thought it unfair that employees who had some wherewithal and knowledge about investments, who could and did invest well, that they should be penalized. So he and the retirement fund agreed that what would happen was the retirement fund would make an actuarial determination of what could or should be the amount that each employee should have contributed over the number of years that they've been in service, and only that amount would be transferred from the 401k to the corpus of the new hybrid plan. Any excess of that amount would be put into a 457, which the employee would have continued control over and continued access to. So those employees who did well will have a starting sum in their corpus. Those who did not do well and who have been in government service 10, 15, 18 years and their earnings in their 401 was not sufficient to meet the actuarial amount for someone at 18 years with, say, the fireman's salary of 80 or 90,000. That the amount that they would have to transfer into the corpus, if they didn't have that amount, they would transfer whatever they had, and the government of Guam would pick up the balance of the difference. That's where that $100 million in the increased unfunded liability, some of that is coming from, is covering for those that don't have any. Because as it currently stands, the testimony that was provided to us was that most employees have about $40,000 in their account. That barely matches their annual salary. So there are various things that this thing is going to do, but one, it is going to have increase the contributions, yes, and I know, Madam Speaker, you're very concerned about that the contributions would go up from 4.5% to 9.5%. But the amount is to make sure that they have the savings and the ability to be able to have a floor in their retirement and an amount that they can receive in the end. And as I try to point out to other people, in the Milliman report that's attached to the committee report, there was a comparison because there was a discussion to try to address this issue of the Social Security. And they made a comparison of how much you would receive under Social Security, how much you would receive under this new hybrid. And it was determined that under this new hybrid plan, the employees would be receiving more in their retirement years than would be provided by the Social Security system. And the Social Security system requires a 6.5 contribution by the employee and a 6.5 contribution by the government, by the employer. So that's fairly steep, and we have to look at that. As long as I'm talking about Social Security, I did include it in the new Section 5 in this new floor, my floor substitution, Madam Speaker. I know that there have been numerous letters to the editor, and I know one of our colleagues is very, and actually we as a body submitted a resolution to Congresswoman Verdalio asking her to get legislation to amend the federal law which precludes Guam employees from Social Security. The way the law reads, it's for everybody except for American Samoa and Guam. Interesting piece of legislation completely excluding us. It wasn't until after the hearing and the committee report has the newspaper articles. Joe T. St. Augustine was one of the most phenomenal research troves, repository on island. He has the blue carbon copies of just about everything that was ever produced during the years that he was either director of administration or a senator. And he has just about every article that included him in his 60 years or 70 years of service to the government since 1950. But he provided newspaper articles that show that there have been attempts since 1972, when he was the director of administration, to get us into Social Security. There have been renewed efforts in '89. I know I tried doing it when I came in 2005. And I know that the Congresswoman has introduced legislation to try to get us into the Social Security, but I cannot, as was suggested in a couple of letters to the editor, that we put this off until we get word from Social Security, from the Congress of whether or not they're going to admit us into Social Security. Madam Speaker, I cannot, in good conscience, wait that long. We all know that we've waited as a community for 70 years for war reparations. I was on a federal commission where we issued a report that said it was a moral obligation of the United States government to pay reparations. We issued that report 10 years ago this month. To this date, 17,000 of the survivors of World War II have now passed. And nothing. They went to their grave with nothing. I cannot and will not allow this bill to wait until Congress decides it's going to address it. Every morning I wake up to my email, there's at least 2 emails from some movement in the States, whether it's AARP or another one, say Social Security Works, that is asking for money because they're fighting to try to save Social Security. Madam Speaker, I think we have the opportunity to take care of our own people here in this plan. Some very, very diligent and hardworking members of the retirement fund, including members of the private community who have no vested interest, who will never receive a retirement check, have worked for 10 years to try to develop this plan. Our late colleague never had one retirement check. but I know of no member of this legislature that has ever fought as hard as he did for the retirees of the future and the retirees of the past. We conducted 2 nights of hearings, almost 6 hours of hearings. The Committee on Retirement and Appropriations transcribed, Madam Speaker, verbatim, the testimony of 2 nights of testimony. Not summarized, transcribed verbatim. There's 90 pages of verbatim transcripts for the members that did not attend, detailing all the explanations, every testimony. The committee report contains actuarial reports from Milliman, financial reports from Wilshire. For those of you that provided me with issues that you had early enough, I was able to submit those questions about what you wanted to include in the bill to the retirement fund, and they were able to get either the financial advisor or the actuary to cost it. And those reports are in the committee report. But in the end, Madam Speaker, I could not in good conscience make any further amendment to this bill that was prepared by a group of people over the last 10 years, except for that one provision, that in the event that we get Social Security, that we would be able to, within a year, we would have to have made a determination of whether or not it was going to be the additional plan for our government employees. The members of the retirement, well, a few of the members of the retirement fund are here if anybody wishes to ask them any questions, or if there are any amendments that you wish to make. I'll stop at this point, and I really am just hoping, Madam Speaker, that everyone in this hall will join me in trying to assure that we don't create a new class of people in this island, the retired poor, by not doing anything to amend the current DC plan to provide a floor for the retirement of these 7,800 individuals that are currently in the government and those that will be coming in the next decades. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Mr. Vice Speaker. On the motion of Bill 394, Senator Nicholas, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to first begin, Madam Speaker, by thanking the Vice Speaker for all of the good reasons why he's trying to move this forward. Having worked with him over this last term, I can certainly attest to, as can perhaps every member on this body, the place that he always comes from when he moves an issue forward is always from a place where he wants to do good for people. And that's something that I always admire about my Vice Speaker. With respect to this bill and what we're trying to address, where we've gone, where we've been in the past with this issue, and what we're looking forward to in the future, there's a lot that needs to be discussed today. And I'd first like to preface that discussion by talking a little bit about my background so that it's not just Senator San Nicolas speaking here. I, prior to coming to the legislature, worked in the private sector as a financial advisor. I was an assistant vice president at the Bank of Guam. My responsibility was meeting the financial goals of my clients, and a lot of those goals included retirement. So when I speak about the issues that I'm going to discuss here today with respect to this bill, it's from that perspective as a financial advisor, having worked on retirement plans and understanding the big picture of what retirement is supposed to be. First, I'd like to begin also, Madam Speaker, with a little bit of history, because this body and this government has been down the road of retirement plans several times in the past. In 1951, the defined benefit plan, now known as the old plan, was adopted by the Government of Guam, and over the course of those years, all the way up until 1995, it's undergone many changes, many different additions that have resulted in the unfunded liability of that very plan ballooning to what at a present day amounts to $1.4 billion with a B. That $1.4 billion unfunded liability is a liability that must be made up for with the tax dollars of the people of Guam. And so we contribute millions of dollars every year to catch up on this unfunded liability so that by the year 2017, is it 2017? No, 17 years from now, I'm sorry, 17 years, 2033. 2030. 17 years from now, about 17 years from now, we will pay off this unfunded liability. We're going to pay off $1.4 billion in 17 years. Now, in 1995, the retirement fund, the very same retirement fund that's moving this bill forward, the retirement fund came before this body and presented an alternative plan. And that alternative plan in 1995 was what we now know today as the defined contribution plan, otherwise known as the new plan. And I pulled out the testimony from the fund in 1995 because it's strikingly similar with respect to the experts and what they're saying and what we can look forward to the testimony that we are getting today with respect to the hybrid plan. We have the director of the retirement fund testifying in favor of the DC plan in 1995, and we have the actuary of the retirement fund testifying in favor of the DC plan in 1995. Very similar to the director and the actuary now testifying in favor of this hybrid plan that's pretty much taking us back to what the previous director and the previous actuary testified that we change out from. And I want to read this testimony into the record because, when I went to the University of Guam, I got my degree in history. And one of the important things for us to remember about history is that we can learn from it. And if we don't, we may have a tendency to repeat it. The testimony of the director at the time reads, Mr. Perez pointed out that Bill 305, which was the bill that created the new plan, as substituted, recognizes the need to change a system that is becoming, quote, less attuned to the economic realities with which the government of Guam must deal, end quote. And that Bill 305, as substituted, will demand greater financial responsibility from GovGuam employees and employers. It goes on to read, pointing out that $730 million in unfunded liabilities and the fact that the government of Guam must pay $100 million in obligations annually, and additionally, $9.3 million must be paid monthly to meet retirement fund obligations compared to $8.7 million in employee contributions. This amounts to 29.17% of payroll. The report goes on to read, and Mr. Perez went on to offer historic background of the present retirement system, relating that the current plan was conceived in 1951 to attract qualified workers, but a combination of embellishment of benefits, growth in the number of employees, and lengthened life expectancies are factors that put a strain on the future economic viability of the present system. Again, he's referring to the old plan. Mr. Perez related that Bill 305 as substituted offers a plan that will, 1, be less susceptible to manipulation by special interest or politics. 2, decrease the unfunded liability. 3, give employees flexibility and control over retirement income. 4, give the employee more take-home pay. And 5, provide savings to the general fund and postpone or eliminate increases in GovGuam contributions. Mr. Perez concluded his testimony by adding that the governor's task force on retirement reform is doing work and research on the COLA issue and will be able to discuss that issue at a later date. Additionally, in this very same committee report, Madam Speaker's testimony from the actuary, Mr. J. Lingo provided a written cost analysis of Bill 305 in his capacity as actuary to the retirement fund. Mr. Lingo pointed out that the savings to GovGuam will be small in the first year of enactment, approximately $1.5 million, but that savings will increase to $4.8 million in the third year. By the 9th year of enactment, the savings to GovGuam will be approximately $22 million. So if this was passed in 1995, 9 years later, Madam Speaker, that was about 2003. So if the actuary was correct, we're saving $22 million to the government of Guam already by adopting that new plan. And I go through this history, Madam Speaker, because the very same people in the retirement fund, the actuary, the person who runs the fund, are now pushing for us to go back to what it was their predecessors pushed so hard for us to change. And we need to be mindful of this history, Madam Speaker, as we as a body deliberate whether or not we're going to go back to what we had before. Now, the reason why we're on the idea of us going back to what we had before is because of the reality that we have a lot of people in the new plan who will be unable to retire if we do not address the shortcomings that manifested as a result of the adoption of the new plan. Now, keep in mind, Madam Speaker, that the very same retirement fund that recommended we adopt this new plan is the same one that's recommending we adopt this hybrid plan. And when we adopted the new plan back in 1995, it resulted in all of these shortcomings in the new plan that caused so much harm to these existing employees. So much harm that a lot of them are really questioning whether they can retire. And as it was mentioned earlier by the retiring speaker, a lot of people saw the returns of the market and they got optimistic about what their conversion from the old plan to the new plan will result in, and they really wanted to take advantage of that. Now, Madam Speaker, I want to, for the record, state some things that were shared with me by some of those people who converted. They didn't just come to the idea on their own that converting would be a good idea. They were sold the idea of converting by people who sat down with them from the retirement fund and said, if you convert and if you continue to get this amount of return that we've gotten in these past years, it's going to grow to this much money. That's what happened, Madam Speaker. The retirement fund made several critical errors in the implementation of the new plan. First, they convinced people who were converting, and they were selling them on the idea that converting would be good for them. And the reason why the retirement fund did that was because they wanted people to convert so that they can reduce the unfunded liability of the fund. The more they can convert from the old plan to the new plan, the lower the unfunded liability. Now that creates kind of a problem, because is the retirement fund supposed to be looking out for the unfunded liability, or is it supposed to be looking out for the employee? At the time it was the unfunded liability, but today, now we're saying it should have been the employee. At the time when we adopted the DC plan in 1995, we did it without Social Security. What we're talking about right now with this hybrid plan that's being proposed is creating a safety net for employees that they at least have something to retire on. That was what was repeatedly stated by the author of the legislation. At least they can have something to retire on. That's something, Madam Speaker, in the bigger picture, is Social Security. But we did not, the retirement fund and the government did not include that in 1995. In 1995, and for 10 years almost, approximately thereafter, when the new plan was adopted by the government, the default option for employee contributions was the money market option within the new plan. Now, breaking it down, what that basically means is that if you didn't pick where to put your money in the new plan, and a lot of people didn't pick because they really didn't know, it would automatically go into a savings account that would earn 1% or less sometimes. Sometimes a little bit more, but definitely not enough for the fund to grow at a rate that would allow people to retire. The retirement fund made a critical error in making that be the default option for such an extended period of time. Because what happened was if you converted over and you didn't select an option, you were by default placed into that low interest bearing account. And all of your new contributions will go into that low interest bearing account. And if you're a new employee coming in and you didn't select an option, or if you didn't attend the seminar and you just went with whatever the fund was going to put you in, it would all go into that low interest bearing account. And so now those employees who for that very extended period of time were earning low interest as a result of the retirement fund making that the default option, they are the ones now who do not have enough money in their accounts to be able to retire. That was not the employee's fault. That needs to be made very clear. Our employees did not make the wrong choice. They were uninformed. And the retirement fund, in its fiduciary responsibility, did not craft a plan at the time to protect against that lack of information. Also, when the DC plan was adopted, it had far too many loopholes, Madam Speaker. Far too many ways for people to be able to withdraw the money and use it for other purposes. And while everybody should be able to use their money for whatever it is they think is their priority, those loopholes again contributed to the fact that a lot of those people now can't retire. And so for us to stand here and demonize the defined contribution plan and say that we got to dump it and adopt this hybrid plan because it's so bad, it wasn't necessarily so bad in and of itself. The implementation of the plan was very bad in so many ways. And those ways include the fact that people were convinced to convert, the fact that we did not put Social Security together with the defined contribution plan to provide that social safety net, the fact that the default option was a low interest bearing account for so many years, and the fact that so many loopholes were still included in the original DC plan, loopholes that have already been closed. It was mentioned, Madam Speaker, about the good work of our late colleague, a man who I respect a great deal. It was mentioned that 5 years of his work went into this. And it was mentioned that so many versions, I think it was, 16 different versions of this went back and forth with him as the chair of the committee. And I respect a great deal the work of Speaker Ben Pangilinan. What's very interesting, Madam Speaker, that I'd like to point out are the timelines of how certain things transpired with respect to where we are today. Speaker Ben, as was testified earlier, as was mentioned by the retiring speaker, received a letter from the retirement fund on June 6th requesting that he move forward this hybrid plan. Speaker Ben, on June 16th, 10 days later, Madam Speaker, voted for my resolution for us to ask for Social Security. If Speaker Ben really wanted to move this hybrid plan forward as presented by the retirement fund, why did he vote for Social Security to be pursued as an option? Speaker Ben is a very hard worker, and if he went back and forth for 5 years on this issue, and if he had 16 different versions and still 10 days after the final came in from the retirement fund, still said, let's look at Social Security, I would proffer that the good speaker was still not sold on the idea of moving this bill forward. And I would proffer that's why he did not report this out and he did not move this bill forward. When something's important to Speaker Ben, we've all seen it. He'll call us into special session and he'll move it out. But he didn't. He actually did the opposite. He got the final version on June 6th, and on June 16th, he voted for my resolution that we all voted for to seek Social Security. Now, it was mentioned by the retiring speaker that Social Security, we asked for it, we never got it. I looked at some of those historical documents, Madam Speaker, and a lot of them were confined to letters that were exchanged between members of this body and bureaucrats within the federal government. But for the first time, Madam Speaker, to my knowledge, unless I can be told otherwise, after we passed this resolution on June 16th, our Congresswoman, on July 30th, introduced House Resolution 5274, a bill in the Congress of the United States in July of this year for the first time, asking the federal government to change the federal law to allow us to be able to contribute and participate in the Social Security system. So this isn't just about, oh, we asked and they never gave it to us. This is concrete federal legislation that our Congresswoman is moving forward to get us access to Social Security. Now, we passed this resolution in June 16th. She introduced this bill onto the floor of Congress on July 30th, and now here we are, mid-October, and we're kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Trying to move this hybrid plan forward in the interest of doing right by all those people who were done wrong by the defined contribution plan. Because according to others, the employee made the mistake of converting, and the employee made the mistake of not investing properly. Our government had a fiduciary responsibility to those employees, and our government dropped the ball on those employees. Now, to make it right, the question now becomes, with respect to this bill, are we going to go back? Are we going to go back and implement the defined benefit plan with a little 1% savings account attached to it? Is that what we're going to do? And can we really do it in a way where we're going to move this forward and say, yeah, let's just do this, and if it's wrong again, we can change it later? Madam Speaker, we got to get it right, and we got to do it right. And I would proffer that fixing the problems that we have with the defined contribution plan, getting Social Security for our Government of Guam employees, those are the long-term solutions that I think we need to work towards. Those are long-term solutions that are already in play thanks to our resolution and Congresswoman Berdalio's introduction of H.R. 5274. Now, the other third item that we need to address is, what do we do about those employees who converted to the new plan and don't have enough to retire, or those employees who were stuck with the default money market savings account and didn't get enough of a return and aren't able to retire, those employees who this government failed, who the retirement fund failed in their fiduciary responsibility to make sure the employee was going to be able to make an informed decision and to constantly get in their face and say, you know what, on the track you're on, you're not going to be able to retire. How many letters were sent to those employees over the course of the last 20 years? I know none, Madam Speaker. I know none because I know people who work in the Government of Guam under the new plan who were never told that the track they're on was a track that was going to lead to a non-retirement. And now we're going to try and do a one-size-fits-all fix that's going to change entirely the course that back in 1995 we had a whole testimony saying we needed to get off of. And so for that third problem, Madam Speaker, those people who are not able to retire, we need to do some work and come up with maybe a supplemental annuity specifically for those people, or some kind of settlement option, a settlement supplemental annuity, so that we can address those people. Because the reality, Madam Speaker, is that while the promise, or at least the hope, I would actually rather say the hope that this bill is going to save those people is pretty far-reaching. If you converted, and I want to make this very clear, if you converted and you withdrew and you put in already 40 years and now you go back into this hybrid, it's not going to save you. This hybrid plan is not going to save you. And I'm very concerned about that misnomer, Madam Speaker. I'm very concerned that our employees out there who think that, oh, I withdrew and I don't have enough to retire, and oh, we're going to have this hybrid plan that's going to save me. It's not going to save you. What this hybrid plan is going to offer is whatever your balance is now in your DC plan, When you convert, that's going to determine your annuity, and you're going to have to put in so many years after that in order to get a certain amount of an annuity. And if your balance is really small, and you already have 30 years of service, you're not all of a sudden going to get 85% of your current salary. You'll be lucky to get $1,000 a month. I really believe that our government, Madam Speaker, needs to do something about those employees who we failed. Those employees who converted, those employees who went into the wrong default option. Something needs to be done. But I don't believe that going back and readopting the hybrid plan, which is a version of the very same defined benefit plan that we converted out of, is the solution. And I want to now talk about why I don't believe that. It's very interesting going back to this Old Testament. I love reading these kind of things because it really shows us a roadmap of what we got to watch out for. The director at the time of the retirement fund spoke of a $730 million unfunded liability back in 1995. How do we go from $730 million in unfunded liabilities to $1.4 billion today when we supposedly shut the whole thing down back then? The reason why is because when you guarantee an annuity and you don't get the returns that you're anticipating on getting, or you create these kind of credits or whatever that the government is able to do because we just pass a bill saying grant this credit, it's going to create unfunded liabilities. And in the testimony from the director at the time, when he listed the 5 points of what the defined contribution plan is intended to do, it accomplished those 5 points. Point number 1 was be less susceptible to manipulation by special interest or politics. You know, in the testimony, if you read the committee report in favor of this hybrid plan by one of our sitting judges, he testified that, oh, you can do it now, what's to stop it now? It stopped. When we adopted the new plan, all of those things that were piling unfunded liability on top of unfunded liability on this retirement fund stopped. When we go back and we put on the same shoes and we walk down the same road by adopting a defined benefit plan that we already got away from, we're going to be opening the door for a future legislature or even a future retirement fund to rack up an unfunded liability in that future hybrid plan. And the argument is, oh, the court's already ruled you can't rack up an unfunded liability. And that's true, you can't. What will happen is that the government's portion will just continue to elevate. So we may not have a sitting balance in the fund, but the government's portion for whatever benefit we want to throw in there will continue to increase. So while we may hope that by 2030, in 17 years, we wipe out the unfunded liability and we reduce the government's contribution, saving 25% of our payroll costs, all we need to do is have the right political time and the right political cause be introduced and be passed, and all of a sudden that 25% that we were thinking we were going to save in 2030 will remanifest itself. And we've seen it in this legislature, Madam Speaker. Oh, we're going to pay off this loan by this date, so I want to authorize a borrowing that will take effect by this date. So that by the time we save on that debt service amount, we're going to be spending it on this new project. What's to stop that from happening where we say, okay, by 2030, we're going to pay off the unfunded liability of the old plan and we're going to save 25% of our government contributions, but let's take that 25% and create new credits for this and new credits for that and new credits for something else. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars here, Madam Speaker, and in order for us to make sure the future is not going to be compromised in that way, we need to make sure that we don't go down those same roads. We need to make sure we don't go down those same roads. And political realities, Madam Speaker, will always be what they are. You know, you introduce the right thing, you get enough people sitting in the public hearing room, you get enough people to sign a petition, and all of a sudden political pressure becomes unbearable. We're 17 years away from paying off $1.4 billion and saving our people tens upon tens upon tens of millions of dollars that can go to education, health, and public safety. All we need to do is stay the course. We've gone through the most difficult part of it. The challenge before us now is how do we fix what went wrong in the implementation of the original proposal back in 1995. We need to fix those things. But it doesn't mean we go back and we reopen the door and we create the same kind of environment that we struggled so much through and that so many people now are in peril with. Madam Speaker, I'm never one to just testify and try and shoot something down. If I really think that things can be adjusted to try and make it work, I'm going to try. I do have a number of amendments that I'd like to proffer, seeing how I'm speaking on the main motion. If I could. We'll go ahead and have this amendment copied and proffered to members of the body. And while this amendment is being copied, Madam Speaker, I would like to address some of the letters that we got, for example, from the Guam Chamber of Commerce. And it reiterates some of the things that we talked about. The concerns of the Guam Chamber indicate that it will be mandating our taxpayers to fund another variation of a defined benefit plan that does not disclose or limit what its future borrowing costs for funding and unfunded liabilities will be. It does not guarantee that future legislatures will not offer enticements or entitlements similar to what took place of the old defined benefit program without funding any increased benefit. And it does not disclose an actuarial determined contribution formula, nor does it disclose the impact on the increased cost of living that will surely follow when the total cost of employment in one segment of the workforce unfairly increases wages, benefits far beyond the other segment. Another thing that was brought up, Madam Speaker, that's important to put on the record is the fact that if we go with this hybrid plan, we would be creating for our own Government of Guam employees, in the absence of Social Security, a type of retirement plan that isn't common in the private sector. It isn't common in retirement plans in the United States, with the exception of state governments. State governments have this, a lot of them do. And by the way, Madam Speaker, every single state government that has a defined benefit plan or a hybrid plan is underwater. All of them have unfunded liabilities. These plans are by design unfunded liability sinkholes for Government of Guam budgets. Every single state budget's defined benefit plan has unfunded liability. So the idea that, oh, it was just the Government of Guam that was irresponsible and created the unfunded liability in the old plan is completely incorrect. Unfunded liabilities are prevalent throughout many of these plans in the United States state governments. But I digress. What I was talking about, Madam Speaker, is the need for us to be able to attract employees or people, our people, back from the United States. If we don't offer Social Security, and with a plan like this, where we're not going to allow people to transfer their 401k balance into this plan, anybody who has a 401k and Social Security, whether on Guam or off island, would view this as an impediment to considering coming here and working for the people of Guam. Because their retirement plan, their 401k, would not be able to transfer into the Government of Guam plan because they're two different types of plans. They wouldn't be able to have their years of service credited in their private sector employment. That's really not an issue when you're talking about the defined contribution plan. And the problem works in the reverse. Without Social Security in the Government of Guam, if someone working in Gov Guam wanted to go and work in the private sector, they all of a sudden wouldn't be able to have any kind of Social Security follow them along because they didn't earn any in the government. And if they are members of the this hybrid plan, and it's all pre-tax contributions that goes in, and they withdraw their balance in the hybrid plan to go into 401k in the private sector, is the retirement fund going to credit them all of the interest that they earned on that money? Or are they just going to be able to pull out the balance? And if they are crediting them the interest, at what rate will that be? And what would happen if somebody wanted that at a guaranteed rate, but the market was down? Boom, we have an instant unfunded liability. Now, the First Amendment, Madam Speaker, that I circulated has to do with requiring disclosures by the retirement fund. If we're going to do this, we need to make sure that we disclose it properly to our people, full disclosure, because I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea thinking, oh, if I convert, I'm going to be good to go. So the First Amendment is for between lines 22 and 23 of page 23 of the bill to add a new section 4 that reads, disclosure required.
Senator, if I may, because what we did earlier is the Vice Speaker had placed a substituted bill by the author and on the floor, and that was accepted. And the Section 3, of course, is very different from what is in the bill that was accepted. So maybe in this case, rather than be specific to a line and a page and all that, that this could be a new Section 3 and allow for legal counsel to do the changes in terms of moving the section.
Sure, I'll yield to any kind of technical corrections legal counsel needs in order to place this properly.
But we just want to make sure we do that, though. You need to do that so that the clerks will not accept the between lines 22 and 23 on page 23 that it be a new section and to renumber.
Sure.
Yes, that's true.
Okay.
Would you, Mike? Okay, so why don't we do it that way then? Let's recess. You still have the floor, Senator. You'll be the first to be recognized with your amendments.
Okay.
And so we will recess until 2 this afternoon.
Thank you.